My name is Jennifer Hale. I'm 32 years old, and that morning I had no idea I was about to become a spectacle in front of an entire courtroom. The Boston sky had been drizzling since 5 a.m. I walked up the steps of the Suffolk County Federal Courthouse in black heels, clutching a dark brown leather case against my chest like it could anchor me while sweat dampened my palms. From a distance, I saw them, my mother standing beside my half-sister, Vanessa. My mother turned away as I approached. Vanessa, on the other hand, looked straight at me, smirking like she already knew what humiliating game was about to unfold. I wasn't on the witness list. I had come to sit quietly in the back, to offer silent support. At least, that's what I told myself. A woman in a black blazer at the check-in table stared at me as I gave my name. Name? Jennifer Hale. She scanned the list, frowned, and pulled out a plastic badge. Here. Pin this on the left side of your chest before entering the courtroom. I took the badge and froze. Nobody. I blinked. Excuse me, there must be a mistake. It should say Jennifer Hale. It's correct. That's what the list says. If you'd like to file a complaint, please step out of the security area. Her voice was flat, like she was reciting an eviction notice. I clenched my fist, clipped the badge to my coat. My chest burned, not from the badge itself, but from what it implied. I was no one. I didn't belong here. Vanessa pulled her phone from her Gucci bag and snapped a picture. The screen reflected the bold black "nobody" across my chest. She raised her brow and grinned like a child who had just planted a tack on the teacher's chair. I didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't look away. I stood still and smoothed the badge like it was an honor I had chosen. But beneath the fabric, my nails were digging into my skin. Courtroom 4B glowed under sterile white LED lights. I chose a seat at the far end, away from the family row. Every step felt like my heels were sinking into concrete. Vanessa strode past me in an ivory blazer and body-hugging skirt, her Chanel perfume trailing behind like smugness in the air. She leaned in and whispered, "You weren't invited. Do yourself a favor and sit still." Smiled faintly. "Then you'd better act well, because this is your scene." Vanessa didn't respond. She flipped her hair and kept walking. Then the lights dimmed. Her attorney rose and walked toward the lectern. "Your Honor, before we begin our main presentation, we request permission to display several images to clarify the context surrounding this case." My spine stiffened. The large screen flickered on. My face, blown up 10 times larger than life, appeared with the words "nobody" right beneath my chin. A quiet laugh rippled from the left side of the room. I heard someone whisper, "Oh, wow." This image was taken this morning prior to the hearing. We believe it represents an individual intentionally inserting herself into these proceedings, uninvited and disruptive. The attorney's voice was slow, deliberate, each word landing like a gavel. I gripped the bench. The hard wood pressed into my skin, but I didn't let go. I wouldn't allow myself to move. They were using my image to construct a false narrative. Worse yet, it was being accepted as truth. I lifted my chin. The courtroom lights beamed straight into my eyes, but I didn't blink. I looked directly at Vanessa. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She knew I would look. My sister, the same one who locked me out on a freezing January night in Maine and told our mother I was being dramatic. Now she stood here using the same old tactic, erase me from the story, then convince me I was the problem all along. But today, I wasn't 16 anymore, and I wasn't going to let it slide like all the times before. I thought projecting my face on the big screen was the peak of humiliation. I was wrong. Vanessa's attorney, a silver-haired man with the polished glare of a showroom car window, flipped to the next slide. This time, it wasn't a photo. It was a document. The logo at the top read Silverwood Behavioral Health Institute Confidential Record. Beneath the italicized header was my name, Jennifer Hale. And the line, evaluation date, November 2011, made my heart skip. I heard chairs shift behind me, followed by a wave of murmurs, spreading like an anthill cracked open. The attorney spoke. This document was submitted by an anonymous third party. We believe it is directly relevant to the psychological stability of this individual, who, in our opinion, has inserted herself into this case inappropriately. I didn't hear the rest. All I saw on the screen was the phrase, diagnosed with acute emotional dysregulation. My chest tightened, my throat went dry. I wasn't 18 anymore, but my body still remembered exactly how it felt to be sent to a facility without understanding why. That year, I had just started my freshman year at Brown. During Thanksgiving break, I came home, just as Vanessa lost a major contract due to her own legal misstep. My mother blamed me, said I was a distraction. That night, after a heated argument, they decided I was unstable and needed a full evaluation. I was driven away at 2 a.m., no crying, no resistance, just numb. All the paperwork had already been signed by my mother. 3 days, 4 sterile walls. No one came to visit. I thought it ended when I walked out of that place. I promised myself I would never speak of it again. And now it was being displayed in open court. I shot up from my seat. Your Honor, I object to the admission of this document. Not only is it being misused, it was obtained through unauthorized access. A judge, a black woman in her 50s, face carved like oak, studied me for a long moment before nodding. Objection noted. However, the court must verify the legitimacy of the file. Do you have evidence this was a breach of personal information? I swallowed hard. I'll need a few minutes to gather it. I turned to Miles, my attorney and my college friend. He had been silent until now, unmoved like a boulder, but when I whispered, check the federal system logs. Vanessa used to work under Judge Harding, right? His expression changed instantly. Miles stepped out, phone in hand. I didn't sit. I turned back toward Vanessa. She didn't look away. In fact, she smirked, like she was savoring her favorite dessert. Been a while since you pushed back, Jen. Still a little too late, though. I stepped closer to her table, lowering my voice so only she could hear. You sure? Because if I remember correctly, on November 14th last year, you used Judge Harding's internal login to access sealed judiciary files, even though you hadn't worked there in months. The smile on Vanessa's face froze like plaster. Miles returned right on cue, holding out his phone. Got it. IP trace from her home address to Silverwood server at 2:14 a.m. Unauthorized access. I raised my hand. Your Honor, I request to submit digital evidence proving the mental health document was obtained through illegal means, violating HIPAA regulations. I move that it be stricken from the court record entirely. The room went completely silent. The judge sighed and tapped her gavel gently. Evidence accepted. The court will recess to review the data breach allegations. Vanessa didn't move. Her hand clutched her handbag tightly. She turned her head, but I could see the tendons in her neck strain. The mask she wore, cold, smug, was starting to crack. Didn't need a win. I just needed the truth to start leaking into the light. The court recessed. I stepped into the hallway. No one spoke, but I heard it clearly in the hushed voices of the legal aides nearby. The girl with the nobody badge, not so nobody after all. I smiled for the first time that day. This was just the overture. The wind from Boston Harbor slapped my face as I stepped out of the courthouse. It wasn't freezing, but just sharp enough to remind me how I had once been frozen that January night. I remember it clearly. I was 18, just back home from my dorm after final exams. My mom and Vanessa's apartment was on the 7th floor. No balcony, but it had a back door leading to the fire escape. I had barely set down my suitcase when Vanessa said, "Mom's pissed about my results. You better stay out of sight." Before I could respond, she shoved me out the back door and locked it. It was sleeting outside, no coat, no shoes. I screamed, pounded on the door, even threw a slipper at the living room window. The lights were still on, but no one came. Vanessa stood watching from inside, wine glass in hand, grinning like she was enjoying a private play. I collapsed onto the metal fire escape, curled up and shivering. The wind cut through my thin shirt like blades. A neighbor heard me crying and called emergency services. They found me with hypothermia, lips blue, consciousness fading. I remember the nurse asking, "Is anyone inside?" I answered, voice shaking like paper. "Yes, but they said I needed to learn to calm down." 3 days later, I woke up in a behavioral ward, the kind with windows that don't open and cameras in every corner. Outside the room were consent papers signed by my mother for temporary mental observation. Vanessa didn't sign them, but she was the one who called my mom to the hospital, saying I had a hysterical episode. I didn't cry during those 3 days, just felt hollow, like something inside had been crushed. I don't remember what I ate. I only remember that when I was discharged, Vanessa handed me a scarf and said, as if granting mercy, "Next time, don't yank on the door so hard. You looked pathetic." For 14 years, I locked that memory in a drawer with no name, no sound. But this afternoon, when Miles handed the judge the printout showing unauthorized access logs, and when the opposing attorney coldly emphasized emotional instability, that drawer exploded open. I couldn't just sit there and let them rewrite the story their way. When court resumed, I asked to address the bench directly. No representative, no lawyer, just me. I stood in the center, adjusted the microphone, and spoke loud enough to reach the back rows. The psychological report is real, but it doesn't tell you who I am. It doesn't say that I was locked outside in freezing rain with no shoes, no coat, no keys. I paused, eyes scanning the room. Silence. It also doesn't say that the person who locked that door is sitting 8 meters from me. The courtroom held its breath. Vanessa said nothing, but her shoulder flinched. They didn't call me a victim. They wrote that I overreacted. And then, my entire family chose silence. No one asked me anything. I turned toward the judge, voice lowering. If being left outside in a snowstorm with a nearly frozen body doesn't qualify as dangerous behavior, then I don't know what does. A woman from the press row bowed her head, scribbling quickly. An older man nearby nodded slowly. But I'm not here today asking for sympathy. I'm here to reclaim the right to tell my own story, and to make it clear, I'm done being silent. My voice cracked slightly, but I didn't lower it. I let them hear. Let each one understand that my pain wasn't invisible. I don't have a fancy title. I'm just an ordinary woman, but I survived, and now I'm fighting so no one else has to go through what I did. The judge nodded. Your statement is on the record. The court will review the use of medical records under federal law. I returned to my seat, and as I passed Vanessa, she muttered, "You're burning yourself alive, Jen." I didn't look at her, just said, loud enough for her alone, "No. I'm holding up a mirror. And you're looking at yourself." One more hearing tomorrow morning. I know Vanessa hasn't played her final card, but neither have I. The next morning, as I stepped into the courtroom, the stares I received no longer held the same suspicion as on day one. A few nods of acknowledgement. A middle-aged woman even whispered to me, "You did great yesterday." I gave a slight nod without smiling. It was still too early to think about the word victory. Today's hearing was expected to focus on financial evidence related to the dispute over control of the New Path Foundation, a charitable organization my mother and Vanessa had established under the banner of family unity. But I knew, as did Miles, that it had never been a shared entity. I had contributed nearly 70% of the initial funding, but due to a technical error, my name was completely removed from the legal records. As I sat down at the plaintiff's table, my eyes scanned the courtroom. And then I saw him, seated at the far end of the left-hand aisle among the public gallery. A dark gray wool coat, no lawyer's tie, but his upright posture, interlaced fingers, and unwavering gaze on the defense bench made him stand out without even trying. He wasn't taking notes, he wasn't speaking, he didn't look around. He just observed. At first I thought he might be an independent journalist, but Miles glanced at me, then subtly tilted his head toward the man. "See him?" I whispered. "Who is that?" Miles didn't answer right away. His eyes remained locked on the man's position. "If I'm not wrong, that's Vincent Traynor, special investigator from the DOJ, the Department of Justice, works with the task force that handles ethical violations involving family, politics, or conflicts of interest." I looked at the man again. He still hadn't blinked, and this time his gaze had landed on Vanessa. At that moment, Vanessa was adjusting her collar, prepping for her upcoming presentation with her attorney, but I could sense something different in her posture, stiffer than usual, like an actress realizing someone was beginning to see through her costume. The hearing began. Vanessa's attorney quickly launched a slideshow, starting with reports from 2019 to 2022, claiming that I held no official financial role in the foundation. As the court can see, the most substantial contributions came from the Monroe family, specifically Miss Anne Monroe and Miss Vanessa Monroe. Miss Jennifer Hale was only listed as a media support partner in the first year's report and subsequently omitted. I showed no reaction. I didn't need to. Miles stepped forward, presenting a file of sponsorship agreements, internal emails, and a bank transaction summary, showing an estimated $312,000 had been transferred into the foundation's account from my personal bank account during the first 3 months of operation. That amount, Your Honor, came from an unsecured personal loan under Jennifer's name. No guarantor from her mother, no co-signature from anyone in the Monroe family. The courtroom fell silent. Vanessa pressed her lips together. She was about to rise, but Vincent, the quiet man at the back, finally removed his glasses and pulled a thick file envelope from his slim leather briefcase. No one summoned him. No one invited him to speak. Yet he stepped into the center aisle, upright, unhurried, as if each step was measured by the weight of truth he carried. The judge narrowed her eyes. "Who are you?" "Vincent Traynor, Department of Justice. I have documents relevant to this case, authorized for emergency submission under Section 29 of the Public Financial Integrity Act." I looked at Miles. He leaned in and whispered only 2 words. "It's here." Vincent handed the envelope to the court clerk, then returned to his seat, not a single extra word. The judge opened the envelope, skimmed the documents, and her frown deepened. "The court is now in recess for 15 minutes to review the evidence. All parties must remain in the courtroom." Vanessa turned to her lawyer. "What is going on?" Her attorney opened his laptop, his hand slightly trembling. "It seems the DOJ has already launched a separate investigation." I sat still, motionless, but my heart was pounding harder than ever. The 15-minute recess passed in a silence so tight it could snap. Everyone knew this was a turning point. The only question was, which way would it break? Judge Evelyn Moore returned to the bench holding a thick file, its pages flipped through and underlined in red ink. On the clerk's desk lay a document stamped with the Department of Justice's raised silver blue seal. Impossible to forge. "The court will resume," Judge Moore announced. "Under Section 47B of the Federal Code on Health, Privacy, and Data Security, the court acknowledges that the documents submitted by Investigator Traynor are legal, significant in nature, and carry potential criminal implications." I heard Vanessa exhale hard. Her attorney shook his head subtly, lips tight. Vincent didn't rise again. This time, the judge did the talking. Specifically, in the past 6 weeks, the Massachusetts judicial system's internal network logged 9 unauthorized access attempts to its medical data archive. Each incident was traced back to an IP address registered under former Judge Roy Harding, whom the defendant once worked for as a legal aid for 2 years. The courtroom let out a low murmur. To be clear, Judge Harding retired in February. All access credentials were revoked in March. Yet the IP in question resumed activity in June. precisely when this hearing was scheduled. I leaned toward Miles. Down to the week. Judge Moore continued. Tracking data shows the logins originated from the current residential address of the defendant, Vanessa Monroe. Vanessa jumped up. I never. Sit down, Miss Monroe. The judge's voice wasn't loud, but it struck like granite. Vanessa's lawyer stood in her place. Your Honor, if there was any breach, it must have been a technical oversight. It's possible the former judge's device was still in the defendant's possession for reference. Judge Moore frowned. Government devices are the property of the judicial office. No one is permitted to retain them post-employment, let alone use them to access sensitive systems. She turned to Vincent. Investigator Traynor, could you elaborate on the severity of this breach? Vincent stood. Light caught the DOJ badge on his lapel. He didn't need notes. Every detail lived in his memory. Your Honor, unauthorized access to encrypted federal medical records is a federal offense. If said access was used to defame, discredit, or manipulate legal proceedings, the perpetrator may be subject to both criminal and civil prosecution. The courtroom air thickened. A lawyer seated behind me whispered to a colleague. This isn't just internal discipline anymore. They're pressing charges. Vincent finally looked at me for the first time since entering the courtroom. Specifically, in this case, the defendant accessed a federally protected psychological record and presented it during court, without consent from the subject, Miss Jennifer Hale. I gripped the edge of the table, not from fear, but because the truth had finally been spoken. Undeniably, unshakably. Based on logs from the Massachusetts court access system, cross-referenced with federal system records and confirmed by the oversight tech team, we have sufficient evidence to conclude that the individual who accessed and downloaded Jennifer Hale's records was Vanessa Monroe. A suffocating silence followed. Then a woman's voice rose from Vanessa's side, not hers, but my mother's. Vanessa, is this true? I turned to look. My mother stood at the back, shoulders hunched, but her eyes were wide with panic. Vanessa didn't answer. She had nowhere to run. Her eyes were glass, cracking under pressure. Judge Moore lowered her glasses. Under Section 38.2b of the Civil Procedure Code and Article 13 of the National Health Privacy Protection Act, this court hereby suspends all administrative, executive, and spokesperson roles held by Ms. Vanessa Monroe in connection to the New Path Foundation. Effective immediately. The gavel struck. 3 dry, final blows. No one said a word. I turned to Miles. He asked softly, Are you okay? I shook my head. No, but I'm starting to be. The hearing ended earlier than expected. Vincent didn't stay. But just before he left the courtroom, he leaned close to me, voice low. This isn't the end. There are things in that foundation account that don't add up. I stared at him, legs still unsteady. Vincent gave a subtle nod. Next time, you won't just be the plaintiff, you'll be the one standing at the center of justice. That afternoon, the Boston courthouse still echoed with footsteps as people filed out of the courtroom. But I didn't leave. I sat alone in the third-floor hallway on a wooden bench facing the city square. An hour earlier, Vanessa had been suspended, but I knew if I stopped here, she'd find a way back. Vanessa always knew how to slip past public opinion. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Message. From Eliza Tran. Where are you? I need to see you. There's something you'll want to see. Eliza, the summer intern from last year at New Path Foundation. She had shadowed me through every community project, quietly taking notes, never interrupting. I remembered the look in her eyes the day Vanessa publicly snapped at her for sending the wrong announcement email. I hadn't stepped in because at that time, I'd already been temporarily excluded from all financial decisions myself. I texted her the address of a small cafe next to the courthouse. 15 minutes later, Eliza arrived, hair neatly tied back, holding a sealed folder and a look of resolve. Jennifer, I can't stay quiet anymore. I nodded. I'm ready to listen. Eliza unzipped the bag and pulled out a stack of documents and a USB drive. These are full backups of internal emails from the first 9 months of the Foundation's operation. I was tasked with storing them in the internal archive system, but when Vanessa ordered a clean sweep, I kept the originals in a private, secure folder. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. You're saying that Vanessa erased traces of multiple fund transfers, from the scholarship fund to her shell company called Creston Advocacy Partners. I quickly skimmed through a few printed emails. The subject lines were dry, but the contents cut deep. Transfer $4,500 to the auxiliary account. Stay quiet until after the September audit. Jennifer won't know. Retagged file under equipment maintenance. I held the USB. Inside were over 200 emails, bank documents, and tampered presentation files. Eliza sat across from me, hands wrapped around her glass, whispering, "I used to think I was just a tiny piece, but if that tiny piece can help you bring it all to light, I'm ready." I didn't hug her. I didn't even thank her right then. I just stared at the USB in my hand and knew it was time to strike back. The next morning, Miles and I were at the DOJ's Internal Investigations Office by 7:40 a.m. In front of me was a thick form. Whistleblower, Internal Disclosure, Section 19B, Federal Ethics Clause. That section was specifically for internal employees or partners uncovering federal-level fraud that hadn't yet been made public. I signed it decisively. Vincent met me afterward in a private meeting room. Only one recorder was running. "You're certain, Jennifer? Once we file this, things move to an entirely different level." I looked him in the eye, my voice calm in a way I didn't expect. If I cared about my reputation, I wouldn't have come forward in the first place. But I've lost more than just that. Truth, trust, even myself. I won't let them take anything else. Vincent nodded, inserting the USB into a secure DOJ-certified drive. "Once our team cross-reference this, the DOJ will officially launch a full-scale financial investigation." I stood. "You can call me whistleblower or whatever you need to write in your reports, but I want them to know one thing. I'm not just seeking justice for myself. I want transparency for everyone who's ever been shut out of the banquet, while they were the ones who cooked the meal." Vincent smiled for the first time. "Then you'll be the one flipping the table." That afternoon, Vanessa held a private press conference trying to manage the damage. She declared, "There are some misunderstandings about the Foundation's financial structure. Everything has been reviewed by legal." I didn't attend. I didn't need to. 3 hours later, a DOJ press release appeared on the official government site. The Department of Justice confirms receipt of a formal whistleblower disclosure related to the New Path Foundation. A federal investigation has been opened in accordance with legal procedures. Vanessa vanished from social media. My mother's phone went straight to voicemail. Their attorney sent a request for settlement through Miles. I said just one thing. I don't want an apology. I want the law. That Monday, Courtroom 6 in Boston had a last-minute change in the presiding judge. The name printed on the morning's docket stopped me in my tracks. Interim Judge, Marcus Langford. I hadn't heard Marcus's name in almost 4 years. 4 years since we broke up. 4 years since I last stood in his Brooklyn apartment, tears silently falling as he said, "We're not walking in sync anymore, Jen." I never imagined the man who once held my hand at a community justice summit would appear here, presiding over the most complicated trial of my life, in a black robe and eyes that no longer belonged to me. The side door behind the bench opened. No music, no special lights, just the sound of the gavel and the clerk's voice. "All rise." The District Court of Boston is now in session. Presiding, Judge Marcus Langford. He walked in. Still, tall, upright shoulders, but colder now. Firmer. The face that once held warmth for me now bore only the stillness of the law. He scanned the room, then his eyes landed on me, just for a fraction of a second, but enough to tighten my chest. Marcus took his seat, opened the case file on the bench. Pursuant to emergency order and petition from the Department of Justice, I've been appointed as interim judge to continue the hearing on the matter regarding the New Path Foundation. No one spoke. Across the aisle, Vanessa looked pale, lips colorless. Her attorney wrung his hands, visibly tense. Marcus flipped to the next page and tapped the gavel lightly. The court has received a complete financial file from the Federal Investigative Unit, including whistleblower testimony and supporting evidence. We will begin by reviewing documents related to the misappropriation of funds. The screen behind him lit up. One by one, the wire transfers appeared. $28,750, consulting fees to Creston Advocacy, $94,200, logistics for events, no receipts. $117,000. App design payment, non-existing company. A total of over $486,000 had been moved from the charity fund to 3 shell companies, all tied back to Vanessa Monroe. Marcus read each entry, voice steady, no comment added. I watched him and barely recognized him. He once sent me videos of community work, once told me transparency starts with the smallest things. Now he was exposing the most hidden parts of what my own family had tried to bury. Vanessa jumped up from her chair. This is a setup. Jennifer, she used her past with the judge to rig this court? Marcus looked up, his voice low but sharp. Ms. Monroe, please remain orderly. I submitted a formal recusal of any personal affiliation with the plaintiff 3 weeks prior to this assignment. The request was reviewed and approved by the Massachusetts Judicial Oversight Office. I'm here not for Ms. Jennifer Hale, but for the truth. Vanessa's lawyer rose, trying to salvage ground. Your Honor, we request time to review the documents and provide a full rebuttal. Marcus raised a hand, cutting him off. Ms. Monroe will be given the opportunity to respond, but before we proceed, I will now enter into record the findings from the Independent Audit Office. He picked up a page and began. From February to October, New Path Foundation made multiple disbursements from its scholarship funds into unverified accounts, authorized by Vanessa Monroe. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt that truth finally had a voice louder than rumor. Marcus glanced at me again. This time, his eyes weren't cold. They were quiet, as if he too felt the weight of having to sit across from a past he once protected. He struck the gavel once more to close the day. We will resume tomorrow morning. The court will now consider the motion to suspend all New Path Foundation operations pending investigation. I walked out of that courtroom, shoulders straight, head high. Marcus had done what the law required, not for me, but for justice, and in that, I no longer had to walk in anyone else's shadow. Boston District Court, Thursday morning. The courtroom felt as cold as a corporate boardroom just before a shareholder revolt. Judge Marcus Langford sat motionless behind the bench, flipping through documents like he was sorting truths into waves crashing against stone. I sat on the right, not as a plaintiff, but as someone preparing to reclaim what had once been stolen. Vanessa said nothing. For 2 days straight, she had shown up in dark makeup, without the oversized sunglasses or the sharp heels she once wore with pride. The woman who pushed me out of the spotlight now curled up in her own shadow. Before issuing a final ruling, Marcus began, this court will admit a newly certified document into the official record, notarized in Middlesex County on January 28, 2021, 2 weeks before Mr. Howard Monroe, father of the defendant and nominal founder of New Path Foundation, passed away. He opened the sealed envelope. As the paper tore under his fingers, I could almost hear something crack inside me, an old memory, finally unlocked. The document reads, I, Howard Monroe, in full mental clarity declare that the New Path Foundation was initially created by my daughter, Jennifer Hale. Due to public relations concerns and social bias, I proposed having my elder daughter, Vanessa Monroe, be the face of the organization during its early fundraising stages. However, the concept, seed funding, and strategic vision all came from Jennifer. I write this statement to confirm that any legal effort to remove Jennifer from leadership does not reflect my intentions and should hold no moral weight within the organization. Marcus looked up. The will includes 3 witness signatures, one of which belongs to Mr. Monroe's personal attorney, who has confirmed the document's legal validity. Vanessa leaned toward her attorney and whispered something, but he shook his head and gently pulled his arm away. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt lighter. Marcus set the letter aside and spoke each word clearly. Based on legal, financial, and testamentary evidence, this court hereby rules that Jennifer Hale shall be reinstated as Executive Director of New Path Foundation, effective immediately. Furthermore, the defendant Vanessa Monroe is to be removed from all positions, roles, and account access within the organization, including financial authority, legal representation, and media communications. The gavel hit the wood, a single, final strike, as if it slammed shut every facade, every manipulation. I rose to my feet slowly. The room stayed silent, no clapping, no cheering, but I didn't need any of that anymore. I looked at Marcus. For the first time, he held my gaze longer than a second. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. But his eyes said enough. He had done his part. I walked out of the courtroom, each step echoing against the marble floor like an old song, this time played in tune on beat. And no one could grab the mic from me again. 3 weeks later, I stood in the main hall of the New Path Foundation headquarters, a renovated 3-story building that used to be a public library in Cambridge. A fresh bronze plaque read, Founder and Executive Director, Jennifer Hale. Transparency is the path, compassion is the fuel. Beside me was Eliza, now our official program assistant, guiding a team of young volunteers through scholarship application files. In the corner, a 10-year-old girl taped colorful notes to the bulletin board. On each one, the kids had written their dreams. To become a doctor. People to speak up without being yelled at. To be trusted. I read every line, my throat tightening. I once wrote wishes like that too, but I had torn them up. Today, I don't need to write them anymore. I'm living them. I no longer need anyone to validate that I'm worthy, I am the right person, and I earned my place, step by step, with the truth. Not by shouting, but by finally speaking without fear. Jennifer's story is clear proof that dignity isn't something handed to you. It's something you reclaim with courage and a relentless pursuit of truth. In a world where power and manipulation often overshadow justice, she chose not to stay silent, not to compromise, and not to seek revenge through bitterness. Instead, she faced everything with reason and integrity, and that's exactly what brought her back to where she belonged. Not because she was forgiven, but because she rose above everything that tried to keep her down. What do you think about Jennifer's journey? Would you have acted like she did if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.